You're watching The Ready Writer, a show where I get to speak to writers of all different genres, mediums, and experiences. The Ready Writer. Are you ready? Hello and welcome to The Ready Writer. I am your host, Casey Bell, and today we finish our interview with Dr. Jeep and Vanessa Naum. They joined me on Healthy and Wealthy Conversations, and we finish our interview here on The Ready Writer. Let's get the show started. How do you teach people to, because most people, I don't want to say most, many people who get married still have the mind of a single person and they still live as a single person. So how do you teach people how to get that marriage mind prior to being married so that it's, changing from I to we,
Right.
us, our, and even simple things. I know people make the joke of, a husband has to get permission from his wife or vice versa before doing anything. And it's like, it's not necessarily permission. It's just, when you
It's
are
a
a married,
courtesy.
well, if you're
It's
a
a
married
courtesy.
couple and you're doing things together, sometimes one might forget something like, a birthday party you both agreed to go to. And so it's not, I'm asking
Sure.
permission. It's just, maybe I forgot something. So I'm just double checking. And people don't realize it's, marriage is not permission. It's business partners. When you have a business with a partner, you check with each other because, like you said, it's courtesy. It's to me, it's common sense. It's not,
Right.
this whole idea
Right.
of permission. And so how
Right.
do you teach people how to get a marriage mind before marriage so that there isn't so much arguing and, back and forth when they get married?
What we do is we take a deep dive into feelings with folks, a real deep dive into feelings. Like, for example, anger. Everyone is going to experience anger, but the way I experience anger might not be the felt way that he experiences anger. So when we deep dive into that, a question is, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, how bad is your anger? And then I would say, my anger is at a 10. So he knows, wow, I'm at a 10. And by talking about the intensity of the anger, the color of the anger, maybe bring in, something in the past that happened. So we're painting this picture of anger, and you could also, throw in any feeling word in there. We're painting the picture so clearly that our partner understands and empathizes. And instead of it being an argument, it is a communicating tool to understand each other more deeply. Because when we argue, we're arguing because we want something that we're not getting, but we sometimes miscommunicate that to our partner. So we want to drill down into, what are you really arguing about? What is the need that's coming from that? And I'll give you an example. We're dressed down during this, right? And Dr. Jeep's very comfortable going to dinner and just, he wears sweats a lot and doesn't have a problem going to, out to dinner with sweats on. And I'm like, we were going out last week and I said, why don't you, change into some nice clothes? And he said, because I don't want to change into nice clothes. And then I could start the attack of, well, you never get dressed up and you always look like a bum and you blah 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 blah. And of course some of these thoughts are firing in my head before I speak, and I thought, okay, Vanessa, what do you really want? Because the attack isn't what I want. What I want is to see him in nice clothes because it turns me on. Okay. So I thought, tell him that. That's what you want. So I said, can you please get some nice clothes on? Because I really love seeing you dressed up. And his comment was, wow, in that case, yeah, I'll go put some nice clothes on because I want you to get turned on from seeing me like that. So that's part of what we teach. Instead of tearing down, use it to build up. But before you start the tear down, ask yourself, why do I want to tear him down? What do I need? And my need was, I want to see you looking as good as you possibly can because I love seeing you get dressed up.
Plus, you know, by the time you get to engagement, you certainly would hope that there is, just by being in the relationship, that there's this knowledge that you pick up that, okay, it's no longer me, it's us. But in some couples, it doesn't happen that way. We don't want to destroy people's individuality. I mean,
Correct.
we're all individuals, but there has to be this knowledge and acceptance that it's sometimes it can be about me, but a lot of times it has to be about us. And if you're saying that, well, I still want to spend half my time with my buddies, and I want to go out, I want to do this, I want to do that, and that was an issue that was between my dad and my mom. I mean, he was out, he worked, but it wasn't about them doing things together. It was, okay, I'm stressed out, I need to go out and spend time with the guys, I gotta go play golf, or I'm gonna go play cards, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. And she wasn't part of the equation. And so what happens with that is disillusionment. A lot of these disses, disillusionment, disenchantment. And unless that's addressed and unless that's communicated, what that does is it causes a gap. And then that gap widens unless it's approached.
It's a cancer that eats at the connection of the relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. So if by the time you're engaged, you're still wanting to have your way a majority of the time and spend a significant part of your time away from your future spouse, then that's where one of you needs to say, we're either going to talk more about this or this is a deal breaker, and we should not pursue this any further.
Now, on the flip side, you may have someone that is doesn't necessarily need to have as much individuation, but they're very clingy and they're high touch, and they really need that partner to be with them constantly. We teach about that individuation versus the
Overdependence.
Right, the overdependence. And when folks learn and understand that can be a dynamic in their relationship, and they learn that that's just how I am, then their partner can understand why they behave in some of the ways that they behave. And once there's awareness of that, then it's a whole lot easier for them to understand where that behavior comes from. And then instead of them turning on their partner, they turn to their partner and understand, okay, because I know that's where that comes from, I'm going to help you with that.
So tell us now, let's talk about your book. Give us the title as well as what's in it for not only married people, I say singles, because I think if you want to be married and you're single, you should start reading those books now so you can prevent the fire instead of reading the instructions of the exterminator of how to put the fire out while the fire is going, So what can
Absolutely.
people in relationships and those who want to be in relationships can get from this book?
The name of the book is What's Forever For? A Physician's Guide for Everlasting Love and Success in Marriage. Now, I said physician's guide because I'm a physician, but it's not meant for strictly physicians. It's meant for it's meant for all relationships. And there's certain chapters in the book, and I'll specifically talk about one, and that is words. Words are huge. I've talked to so many couples, and when you talk to your partner, when you talk to your spouse, try to keep in mind, although you're not going to do it all the time, try to keep in mind that the words that you speak to them, speak them as if that's going to be the last words that you're ever going to say to them. So if you keep that in mind, if something happens, if one of you's killed in a car accident or one of you dies, you will know that those last words were words of encouragement. They were words of building rather than tearing down, rather than destruction. So there are words in situations that can be used that you may not think are going to be hurtful, but not only are they hurtful, they can linger for years, decades, and you've made somebody's journey through life that much harder. So it's about using the proper words, and we're all human. We're going to say things that we don't mean, but we need to try to give thought prior to what we say, is as much as we can.
Like, I committed that. I mean, that was a mortal sin. And I committed that while we were dating. And I had the wherewithal, because he meant so much to me, to understand that I clearly had a problem there. And I'll give you the example. I grew up in a very, very traditional Italian family. And my father was head of the household, and what he said went. And there was a lot of maybe words used that would tear someone down. And so Dr. Jeep and I were getting coffee one day, and he accidentally spilled them on a pair of my favorite suede shoes. And without thinking, what I had been conditioned with growing up came flying out of my mouth. And it was, I can't believe you're a doctor, because sometimes you're so stupid. I can't believe you made it through medical school. And the look and the shock on his face, and of course, silence. And then we got back into the car, and he said, I don't ever want to hear you talk to me like that again. That's not okay. My parents never talked to me like that. And at that moment, I understood the toxicity that I grew up in, and that I couldn't continue to do that in our relationship. And I needed to stop that cycle. So I thought, how am I going to stop this cycle? And I just thought, before I speak, I'm going to just pretend like I'm biting my tongue and really think through something before it comes out of my mouth. And I still do that today. And in fact, I do it with everybody. So, if I'm not talking quickly, it's because I'm thinking through what I want to say before I say it, so that it doesn't come across to the other person as hurtful.
And here's an anagram. I didn't think of it. I found it when I was researching the book. And it's think, THINK. T is it thoughtful. H is it honest. I is it intelligent. N is it necessary. But probably the most important, the last letter K, is it kind. So if you keep that anagram, and we coach that, you keep that in mind, and make it a make it a regular process during discussions, whether they're arguments or not. You're gonna fail sometimes, as we all do.
Right.
But
We're
if you keep
human, right?
you keep that in mind, it's going to prevent these kind of venomous words from coming out of your mouth. And then there's talking about nurturing an atmosphere of love, equality, and respect. It just all three of those words, love, equality, that this is a relationship of equality between the two of you, and the need to respect each other. And if those aren't there, you're not going to progress with a lot of things. You're not going to progress in intimacy, which is not only physical intimacy but emotional intimacy. There's not going to be you're not going to have a connection. And again, this is something that if my dad had this before, my mother, there probably would have been better treatment there, but it wasn't there. And so that's something that's important in the book for couples to read too.
I like the idea of how you said words. Pretend it's the last thing you're going to say every time you speak. And definitely the anagram. I used to be very sarcastic, and I used to joke a lot and say, even though I would be joking sometimes, now I'm in my life, before I say anything, I say, is it really necessary? And that's all I ask myself. And if the answer is no, I don't say it. And I think because we, especially in America, we live in I have the free speech to say what I want, when I want, how I want. We forget that you do have the freedom. You don't have the freedom to choose the karma that comes with what you say. And so
absolutely,
it's best just to ask yourself, is that person going to die if you don't say this? And if the answer is no, just, if it's not uplifting and helpful, just don't say
exactly.
it at all.
Exactly.
So, glad you mentioned that.
Sure.
Would you, so what are some things a couple can do if they truly believe, we're not going to get a divorce, we're going to work this out? And they both agree with it, because that's one of the main problems, is sometimes they're both not in agreement. They both agree that we have issues, we have problems, we still believe though we need to stay together. And it can't be, obviously, because of children, because that's another problem. Sometimes they stay together for the children, it makes it worse.
Right.
So what are some things couples can do when they're at the point of they feel like getting a divorce, even though they believe they don't need one? What are some things they can start working on individually and collectively?
Are each of you best friends? Were you always best friends? And if you're not, what happened that you're not best friends?
Yeah.
What attracted each of you to each other? Why did you get married, and what has caused you to deviate from that? If you even realize that you have deviated from it, or has this been a slow drip that has happened over a period of time?
And where can you negotiate? There are unsolvable problems that come up in relationships. So with that being said, something will come up where I'm not going to agree with him at all. And at that point, he needs to make the decision, is that something that he can live with? So is this a deal breaker, so to say? Those are the kind of things you hope you find out at the beginning, rather than, waiting until you've been married and you have a family, and, you want to catch that before that happens.
But Vanessa and I differ a little bit here, because I'm somebody who thinks that there's a mid ground, and she's probably right that there is some, in some cases there isn't. But to give you an example, we did some training about in dealing with couples that had been at the end, like that there's nothing There's nothing left. Supposedly they've tried everything else. But in fact, one of the couples that was in their training had there had been 3 instances of infidelity in their relationship, and 2 with one spouse, 1 with the other. But there was something about their relationship that they both felt, that they thought that it was worth saving. And as long as you have that, as now this is an extreme example, obviously, but as long as you have that, then there is that potential that you can get through these things. And they're to the point now where they've gotten on the other side of this, and they actually help train other couples with that.
So you keep saying coaching. Is this one-on-one only, or do you also provide like group coaching with 3 or 4 couples at the same time?
What we like to do is work one-on-one with couples, and we have a program, and it's called 90 Days to Clarity and Connection. And the first 30 days is just working on clarity. What do you want? What do you need? Why did you get married to begin with? Getting clear on what is going on and becoming aware of what's going on. And then using our tips and some principles of healthy relationships to go into the second part of the program and deal with challenges that come up. Challenges like being vulnerable with each other, shaming, learning not to shame each other, and how to work with each other and communicate. Like I said, going through it into a deep dive with feelings. That's the middle of the program. And then the last part of the program is dealing with sexuality and going down deep into that, more so than we've seen other programs do. I am a sex and relationship coach, so we dig a little more deeply into that. Like, for example, why do you go to sex? What is the primary need besides pleasure? Like, take pleasure totally out of the equation. Why do you go to sex? What and how do you feel? How do you want to feel during sex, during making love? And those are questions that, I just discovered going through a training program. So I went through a third to a half of my life not being able to answer those questions. And when you get thought-provoking questions like that, then things start making a little more sense. And then when you're able to share that with your partner, then they can become, understanding, empathetic, and get on that level with you. It really intensifies the intimacy.
And it's an extremely, I think, underappreciated part of marriage coaching.
Yeah.
A lot of coaches do not feel comfortable with it. They're referred outside. They got to go to somebody else, and so we felt in building this program that it was very necessary to include that.
And it's not just about the physicality of it. We talk about the emotionality of it.
Awesome. I think it's weird because your program is about getting these couples to come together to have a conversation. And when you think about running a business or being a teammate in a sport or doing theater or music together, when we know it's two or more, we have conversations, we're going to do this, what we're not going to do. When we have a disagreement, we come to a conclusion. Yet a marriage is like the only institution where before people get married, they don't discuss anything. You know, it's kind of like, it would be weird if a baseball team went out there and didn't discuss anything. They just went out there, they would lose because, you know, you need to
Yeah.
discuss. So I find it weird that marriage is the only place where, even when you say plan your marriage before you plan your wedding, that's weird for people. And it's like, but why? Because you're supposed to spend forever together. Don't you want to have that conversation now, not later? And so what are some things, because I know sometimes people say, well, I don't want them to run away if I ask this question, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. I know what you're getting at. And that's just it. We vote for protection over connection, but we don't realize we're doing it. We really don't want to hear that answer. We just want to assume that we know what that answer is. Because at that point in time, we don't want to hear something bad. When understanding that if you don't hear it now, you will definitely hear it at some point in your relationship. So it's better to just cut to the chase in the beginning and talk about it, and vote for connection, and realize that in growth, it's hard to grow. And that if you're talking about hard things, you're growing together, you're growing in connection, and you're growing in intimacy.
All right, so my last question for you, there's so much more I can ask you right now. I don't want to take up your time. One of the last things, well, there are so many things that's wrong with people do wrong in marriage. One of the main things I would say they do wrong is when there is a disagreement, they feel the need to involve other than a therapist, outside people, whether it's family, friends. You won't believe what ABC did. And I don't think people understand the dangers of involving a third or fourth or fifth party. And one of the things I tell people, if you ever include me in your problems, the first thing I'm going to say, I'm not going to say anything to you without your significant other by your side. It's because you're together, so I shouldn't be talking to you.
Right.
Secondly, if I'm not the one who's living in your household, you shouldn't be talking to me in the first place. You really need to get a professional. And so please explain the dangers of either at the barbershop, at the salon, talking about, you know, your problems that causes.
It's what we've counseled couples, and let's face it, you know, our lips have slipped, so to speak, and some of us have slipped more than others, but it is a very slippery slope. I mean, you can say, I'm going to tell you this in confidence, and you can't tell anybody what I'm getting ready to tell you. Well, that doesn't work, because somebody may be in the heat of a conversation and didn't mean to, you know, bring something up, and then they say, oh, well, I was talking to so-and-so the other day and this happened. It shouldn't have to be said, but in some cases it does, is that you discuss with each other that you're going to keep what's an issue between the two of you, and you're not going to, for lack of a better verb, you're not going to rag on your spouse to somebody else, because if it gets back, then there's this loss of respect. There is this feeling
of betrayal,
that, hey, you know, nothing inside our marriage is
sacred.
And so whatever happens between the two of us, it's going to make its way out, and then that just causes this this lack of respect causes a breakdown in communication. Well, I'm not going to say anything to you about this because you're going to tell your girlfriend about it.
And that's when when I talked earlier about the break in the road and you start going in two different directions, that's something that can happen at that point because, of course, we shared something that was vulnerable and
oh yeah.
And then we just, we're not going to share vulnerable things in the future because then we're afraid, right? We're voting for protection instead of connection. There's rules for arguing that we have in the book. And one of them is no third parties. So have we sent you the book yet, Casey?
Yeah.
We'll need to get that to you. Okay.
Got the ebook.
Yes, great.
But
yeah, there are rules for arguing and no third parties is in there.
And so it's just it is a complete no-win situation.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you think you just need to get something off your chest, if you need to get something off your chest, it needs to be with your partner. It needs to be with your spouse, because what did I talk about? Nurturing love, equality, and respect. And what does that do when you take things outside of your relationship? You lose respect.
It's no longer
and
equal
and it's
either.
not equality.
Right.
It's not, and really, that makes, if you don't have those two, then that makes love even more difficult, and that starts to break down. So it is just not worth the risk.
That is all the time we have for you today on The Ready Writer. I want to thank our guests, Dr. G and Vanessa Naum, for stopping on by and sharing. Thank you for watching as well, audience. Have a great day.